Good day folks, I'm Wayne Duvenage from OUTA, the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. This is our weekly wrap for the 23rd of January in the new year 2026. And what a year it's going to be. But before we get into anything else this week, let me just say that we've been doing these wraps for the better part of last year. These weekly wraps, they are really intended to give a summary of what has happened in our world, in the world of corruption, maladministration, bad policy decisions. And we've been getting a lot of feedback from our supporters that they really look forward to it. So thanks for that. Hit the subscribe button, share as much as you can, please. Thanks a lot. So let's take a pause because on Monday, as we know, many of you might know, a minibus taxi carrying children overloaded crashed in Vanderbijlpark and 14 children lost their lives. This is 14 families that received the call that no parent should receive. And there are just no words that can soften that kind of loss. And a 22-year-old driver has been arrested, but let's face it, arrests after the fact is not justice. This is just damage control. Nothing prepares a family for losing a child on the way to school. And nothing can undo that moment. But we need to be honest, this is not just a freak accident. This is not just bad luck. It wasn't something that was unavoidable. This is part of a pattern we see time and time again in South Africa. Too many unroadworthy vehicles, unlicensed drivers, weak law enforcement, and a system really that just wakes up for a brief moment once people are killed, and then it goes back to sleep again after the politicians have had their say at the funerals and the headlines die, and more people will die. What we're often told is that AARTO is going to fix this problem, but it isn't. Certainly not on its own. And even if AARTO, this whole demerit point system, eventually gets off the ground, been trying to do so for 15 years, that in itself tells you something is seriously wrong. These are penalties after the infringements. What really needs to happen is more robust oversight that stops unsafe drivers and vehicles from entering our roads in the first place. AARTO has given the Department of Transport an overview of the extensive corruption that takes place in these roadworthy vehicle testing stations. And nothing changes. Bribery takes place, driving competency testing and driver's licenses is fraught with corruption. It all really means very little. We need to see the swift removal of dangerous vehicles, dangerous drivers, and have meaningful consequences. There's another uncomfortable question, though, that arises out of all of this is where is the accountability for the vehicle owners and the operators that force so often these drivers who are trying to cling on to their jobs into unsafe vehicles? They force them to meet their targets of getting people to and from their destinations at speed, driving unsafely. It's these entities and people that employ the drivers that are often behind the scenes the problem in this picture. And they need to be dealt with as well. And yet we seldom see accountability at that level. So if the system is only going to arrest the driver and doesn't follow the money and the ownership, then it's a system not built for safety. It's a system often built to protect those higher up the chain. So we need to do something about this. We cannot just react when passengers die, because that tells you the system has failed. And that brings us to a wider picture in this whole transportation space, where road safety just doesn't exist in a vacuum. We've seen and heard now some good news that driver's license validity periods will be extended from 5 to 8 years. Well, that's good. We've done our research. It does not mean that accident rates will go up. And what it does do is it deals with this backlog more efficiently. It reduces costs. And this is something that the minister has been speaking about now for a while. But our problem is now, frustration is that it just doesn't get implemented. We move far too slowly. While we're on the subject, by the way, on roads and accountability, we've seen this week SANRAL back in the spotlight. And there are growing calls for independent investigations into so much that is going wrong with tenders that are awarded and withdrawn and challenged in court. And quite frankly, this call is overdue. We've seen so much overreach by this board. And the problem is that this board's tenure, its second, third year tenure, ended 2 years ago. And what was a temporary period of extension to January has been extended again. This knee-jerk reaction to not take the time, and you know, the minister's known about this for some time now. 6 months ago, they could have started the process, find the good candidates to sit on this board, people with experience, people that have got good governance experience and history. We don't see that. We see this last minute, oh, we haven't fulfilled this process yet, so let's just extend it again. 2 years overdue, and it gets extended again. And we've seen this. Again, we just took too short a period to replace Shamila Batoy in the NPA. We took zero time when we had all the time in the world, knowing that when I say we, government, knowing that the tenure, the 5-year tenure of the boards and the CEOs at the SEATAs were due for replacement in March last year, and it didn't happen in time. Last minute action taken, which we have now had to go and challenge some of these appointments in court at the SEATAs. It's just shocking. You know, this is just bad administration. This is just bad planning. This is neglect, quite frankly. This is deliberate neglect and tolerance of inefficiencies and conduct in state institutions, especially at those which are really concerning, where they overspend and waste billions of rands each year, and this is reported year after year in the Auditor General's report. Shocking. Energy is another area that, yeah, logic really has taken a short holiday. Again, you know, we see Eskom threatening to cut off power to those households who've installed solar systems or to fine them because they haven't registered their systems with Eskom. Now, let that sink in for a little bit. After years of load shedding and rampant electricity price increases, South Africans, like many people around the world, just need to mitigate the negative consequences of bad management. So they spend money to keep the lights on and to lower their financial risks. And now they're being treated as if they are the problem. And we've said this repeatedly, you just cannot punish citizens for solving a crisis that government created. So it's our view that Eskom and municipalities cannot disconnect or fine homeowners who have installed a safe and legally certified compliant solar system on their side of the meter box. As far as we are concerned, you don't have to register or get permission from the authorities to install your solar systems. For as long as it is compliant, it is safe, it has got a certificate of compliance by a registered and certified electrician, that the system is under 100 kilowatts and that it's not feeding back into the grid. If those are all the circumstances, then our view is that you don't have to register. So we will keep pushing back hard on these irrational and inconsistent and, quite frankly, somewhat unlawful decisions by the authorities. And we'll keep the public and our supporters updated on the latest developments in this regard. We're taking legal advice, we're engaging with the authorities, and we suggest that you do not succumb to the pressure that Eskom and municipalities demand that you register your system with them. Let's move on now to policing and accountability. We've seen the Madlanga Commission and the Ad Hoc Portfolio Committee last year just raising so much, giving so much clarity around the concerns of the infiltration of the policing system by syndicates and political interference and so on. So yeah, the Ad Hoc Committee got underway this week. We've seen IPID, previous IPID boss, and Mkhwanazi, but not Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. This is Julius Mkhwanazi back in the chair, trying to explain themselves as to what happened. I think the public were not impressed with these revelations and submissions this week. But policing and accountability is the problem. It just remains volatile. And I think many were pleased with the fact that KwaZulu-Natal, towards the end of last year, endorsed Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi for a second term as the provincial head of police. And that landed, however, at a complicated moment where, on the one hand, he's credited by many with confronting entrenched criminal networks in the policing system. But on the other hand, allegations, counter-allegations, these things just continue to swirl around the interference and intelligence failures and these consistent internal power struggles in the police. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens as this process unfolds going into the new year. While it happens, the civil society continues to wait for meaningful accountability to flow. That's what has to happen. We have not seen enough of that flowing. In fact, very little flowing out of previous commissions. So we need to see what happens. We need the president, who's already received an interim report, to make this report public. Sadly, this lack of transparency just continues to pervade government at every level. We can't understand why that report cannot be made public. But we've lived through this before, and we know that truth without consequences becomes just really a theatre. And what we see is evidence, no action, and it just becomes noise. And this is the noise that frustrates civil society and just widens this gap of mistrust in government, which again has been highlighted in the Edelman Trust Barometer. We've seen, last year, or recently, the results of this Edelman Trust Barometer have come out. South Africa remains extremely low trust in its government, 36%. It's slightly up on last year, which we believe is, and they believe in their report, is around a little bit of a shift that has been attributed to a cautious optimism surrounding the establishment of the government of national unity. But on the whole, the trust that our public have in government is extremely low, one of the lowest in the world, in this Edelman Trust Barometer that's measured. In Parliament this week, what we saw with the ad hoc committee's continued discussions and revelations with Robert McBride appearing, and Julius Mkhwanazi, who was the Ekurhuleni Metro Police head, just leaves a lot to be desired. Not enough faith has emanated in their input over the last few days. And again, Ekurhuleni is also in the headlines again for other reasons. This time allegations are around investigations involving the mayor, Nkosi Ndakaza, who, in connection with two high-profile killings, there's a lot of question marks around exactly what is going on here. No findings, by the way, have been made. And these matters have been escalated to the Serious Crime Unit after serious investigation failures were identified. And that in itself is very, very telling. On the national front, the prosecuting authority has entered a new chapter. We heard earlier this month, President Ramaphosa appointed Andy Motibi, the ex-head of the SIU, Special Investigations Unit now. He is the National Director of Public Prosecution. This is a pivotal appointment. I think, again, I mentioned earlier these knee-jerk reactions, late appointments. Really, the whole fiasco was a debacle last year in trying to find Shamila Batoy's replacement. So what we have is a shift away from the normal process and the president using his powers to appoint Andy Motibi. Now, Andy Motibi is trusted by most. We have good relations with the SIU. We work closely with them, and we think that this appointment is a good one. But the NDPP's office, the National Director of Public Prosecution's office, sits at the center of South Africa's fight against corruption. And it does set the tone for whether prosecutions move forward or stall, and whether evidence is acted on or quietly filed away. More importantly, we hope that this change is going to shake the tree in the NPA. And what we want to see is Andy Motibi delivering demands for more resources, more professionalization at the NPA, and tackling the questionable conduct by prosecutors that has raised a number of concerns over the last few years now. South Africans will be watching Andy Motibi closely, and I think we can expect to see somebody who doesn't give speeches without meaning. I don't think he promises without meaningfully tackling what he said he's going to do. So we want to see action, we want to see high-profile cases, we want to see people that should have been in orange ovals and imprisoned a long time ago starting to move towards those gates. Consistent decision-making is required here, and we need to see the courage of prosecution without fear or favor. And then just to remind us that the world is also slightly unhinged, the global geopolitical order is shifting, and rather rapidly. Certainly on the back of Donald Trump's insistence that he wants to acquire Greenland to become part of the USA. And this poses the whole question that geopolitical boundaries and national sovereignty now is something that can be negotiated or should be negotiated, and if not, then bullying tactics will be applied, especially if you head a country that has a lot of power. It is rather strange to see what's happening. And while it may appear to be amusing on the surface, it speaks to something so much deeper. Global politics is just becoming transactional now. Power plays are dressed up as jokes, and these jokes actually have serious and real consequences. So we'll have to see what plays out there, and there's no doubt that what happens on the geopolitical stage has an impact on this country. And we've got to be very careful how we position ourselves as a country within this great mosaic of what is playing out. Even though we are a small player in the global economy, we're an important player, and we need to behave in a way that positions our South Africa as a country that is really serious and meaningful in how it deals with so much that is wrong in this world. Closer to home, South Africa is navigating real diplomatic strain. We see relationships sour, we see how citizens suffer the consequences. We've seen too many disasters that are happening, lack of funds to deal with them, and the poor again suffer when it takes years to be compensated and houses rebuilt as a result of flooding in KZN, big floods in Limpopo. How long is it going to take for our citizens to feel that they've got what was rightly deserved? It takes far too long because we have this very, very slow reaction to emergency situations in this country. And through this we lose opportunities. We have economic fallout. And we just see how our politicians continue to fail and fail to protect the public. This week, AARTO throws another legal challenge into the mix of its work by challenging and going to court on the reappointment of Gugu Mkhize as the CEO of the insurance SEATA, also known as INSETA, by the Minister of Higher Education, Buti Manamela. And this case is not about personalities. It's about whether rules and regulations still matter. INSETA received 4 consecutive qualified audits under Ms. Mkhize's leadership. The Auditor General has repeatedly flagged serious internal control failures, financial mismanagement, irregular expenditure, non-compliance with the Public Finance Management Act, and AARTO as well has also sought information pertaining to dubious tenders involving millions of rands and have received little to meaningless response from the SEATA. And despite all of this, the minister decided to reappoint her in what was a rushed process that lacked the thoroughness that was required. The boards weren't even fully constituted. There were no chairpersons. And this was a case of decisions being done whilst urgent directives were being put in place by the minister and with very little guidance, very little meaningful information for him to do so. This for us spells out cronyism. It spells out, again, a government knee-jerking and reacting very, very late to filling very, very important positions. AARTO believes that what he has done was unlawful and procedurally flawed and driven by expediency rather than competence. So we're asking a simple question. Where are the rules? Why aren't they being followed? Why are they being bypassed? Because it matters. SEATAs are funded to the tune of collectively about 20 billion rand of skills development levies that are collected from the employers. And recent independent reviews and research shows that this levy This income has surged by over 46% in the past 13 years. And at the same time, throughout that same period, output and performance has declined by 23%. Something is seriously amiss with our skills development levies and the way they are spent. And this model needs to change sooner rather than later. As South Africans, I think we deserve far more value for money when it comes to dealing with our youth and the education. We have a serious problem here. We do not need to see recycled failure. And so when you step back and you look at all of this, you see a pattern. We see a pattern emerging, children dying on our roads, citizens being threatened for installing solar systems, police institutions are under strain, boards are overstaying their welcome, rules are being ignored, rules are being bent, weak accountability, and lives lost. And all of this just costs money. It costs in trust and the lack thereof. And this is why OUTA exists, not just to comment from the sidelines, and certainly not just accept the excuses that our politicians give us and our administrators give us. We're here to push, we're here to challenge, we're here to demand answers to serious questions, we're here to litigate when it is necessary. And we're here to ask the tough questions that so often are avoided or attempted to be avoided. And because 14 children should never have died, they should still be alive today. And because taxpayers really shouldn't be funding failure. And citizens shouldn't be punished for resilience to bad governance. And because this country is capable of far more, so much more, than what we are told that we have to keep accepting. It's not on. So let's look forward to a great year, the end of this year, 10 months time, by the way, local elections. We'll be talking a lot about that. That's it for this week. Stay alert, stay engaged, and let's keep reminding ourselves that accountability and transparency is not optional. Thank you.